city was alive, yet merciless. Rain fell in silver sheets against the windows of passing cars, each droplet catching the glow of neon signs that flickered along the streets. The honking of horns and the rush of engines filled the night air, but for David, sitting slouched behind the wheel of his faded yellow cab, the world felt eerily quiet. His cab light glowed, available in green, but no one seemed to notice or care. Dozens of people passed him by, umbrellas bobbing like shadows in the downpour. Some raised a hand only to quickly wave down a different cab, shinier, newer. Others glanced at him briefly before turning away, as though the sight of his weary face through the windshield was reason enough to avoid stepping inside. To them he was not a man. He was a service, a seat, a steering wheel, a nobody. David had grown used to this invisibility, but tonight it pressed heavier on his chest. 52 years old, lines etched deep into his skin, eyes dim from sleepless nights and endless miles. He had once been a man with a family, with laughter waiting for him at home, with children whose drawings were taped proudly to the refrigerator door. Now that same refrigerator buzzed in a lonely apartment where silence was his only company. The photographs on his wall had faded with time, their colors dulled like his spirit. The cab smelled faintly of old leather and cheap coffee, his lifeline during the long nights. Passengers entered and exited, leaving behind fragments of themselves but never truly seeing him. A businessman barking orders into his phone, never once saying thank you. A group of young people laughing, their jokes spilling out, some landing on him, mocking him for the life he led. Tonight had been no different. One woman sneered when he offered to help with her luggage, muttering that he should just drive. Another slammed the door so hard the glass rattled, as though his presence was beneath acknowledgement. And then there was the passenger who laughed openly, asking, "So, how does it feel to be just a driver your whole life?" The words stuck to him like oil, harder to wipe off than the rain on his windshield. Still, David smiled, a small, polite curl of the lips that hid the sting inside. He had mastered the art of pretending the words didn't cut, pretending he didn't feel the crushing weight of being unseen. But as midnight approached, the city seemed to forget him entirely. No passengers waved, no phones rang for pickups, only the hum of rain and the occasional hiss of tires across wet asphalt. His cab idled at the curb, the neon reflections painting streaks of red and blue across the hood. The world moved on, indifferent. Then it happened. The shrill buzz of his phone shattered the silence. David's head snapped toward the dashboard where his old cell phone vibrated against the cracked plastic. The screen glowed an unfamiliar, yet hauntingly familiar number. His heart clenched. His breath caught in his throat. For a moment, he didn't dare touch it. It couldn't be. That number. It hadn't appeared in decades. His hands trembled as he reached forward, fingers hovering above the screen. Rain drummed harder on the roof, as though the city itself was urging him to answer. He swallowed hard, his chest tightening, sweat mixing with the damp chill of the night. When he finally pressed the button, his voice cracked as he whispered, "Hello?" On the other end, silence. Then faintly, a voice. Fragile, hesitant, familiar. "Dad?" David froze. The world around him blurred. The neon lights, the sound of traffic, even the rain, all of it fell away. That single word echoed through him like thunder. Dad. It was a voice he hadn't heard in years, not since she walked out of his life. Not since the family he once held together had fractured beyond repair. His estranged daughter, the one he thought he had lost forever. But why now? Why after all these years? His chest heaved as he gripped the phone tighter, afraid that if he let go, the voice would vanish like a dream. His mind raced with questions, his body rigid with fear and hope colliding at once. What she said next would change everything. If you believe no one should be treated as invisible, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, because every act of kindness matters. "Dad," the voice repeated, this time shaking, breaking. I don't know who else to call. I need you." And in that single moment, the invisible driver was no longer unseen. The past he had buried was reaching for him, and the choice he would make next could either destroy what little remained of him, or save them both. The line crackled, her breath shallow, filled with fear. David's heart pounded so hard it drowned out the storm outside. He whispered her name, trembling. But the call wasn't over. Her words were only the beginning. The cab shook under the weight of the storm, wipers dragging furiously across the windshield, when David's world froze around one fragile word. Dad. It was a voice he had memorized years ago, tucked away in the dusty corridors of his heart. Yet here it was again, hesitant, trembling, broken. His estranged daughter, the one who had vanished after bitterness and mistakes tore their family apart. For years he replayed the moment she walked away, the sound of the door slamming like a final nail, sealing his fate as a father who had failed. And now, after all the silence, she was calling him, crying, afraid. David's hands tightened around the wheel, his knuckles pale, his breath quickening. "Where are you?" he whispered into the phone, though the cab felt like it was swallowing his voice whole. Her sobs crackled through the line, muffled by the storm around her. I don't know. Somewhere downtown. There's a boarded-up shop behind me, and a bus stop sign." Her voice broke. Dad, I didn't know who else to call. Every second stretched long, heavy, suffocating. For years, he had begged the universe for a chance to hear those words again. Dad, I need you. And now, that plea was real, but laced with terror. He didn't think. His foot slammed the accelerator, and the cab lurched forward, tires slicing through rivers of rainwater pooling on the asphalt. Neon signs streaked across the glass in smears of pink and blue, the city blurring as his heart raced ahead of him. But as he drove, doubt clawed at him. Could he face her? Could he forgive himself for the years of silence, for the words they had both said in anger? What if she hated him still? What if this was the last time he'd ever hear her voice? The cab rattled over potholes, his chest tightening. Passers-by on sidewalks blurred into faceless shadows, their umbrellas bending against the wind. To them, he was still invisible, just another cab hurtling through the storm. But tonight, something had shifted. Tonight, his existence mattered to someone who needed him most. Stay where you are, David said, forcing steadiness into his voice. Don't move. I'm coming for you. Her voice was faint, almost swallowed by the static of the storm. Please hurry. The words pierced him, sharper than any insult thrown by strangers in the back seat of his cab. For years, he had been ignored, discarded like background noise. But in this single moment, he was everything. Block after block. His eyes darted across every corner, every sign, every flicker of a bus stop bench. The rain blurred the windshield, but his determination cut through it like fire. And then, there she was. On a lonely corner near a shuttered store, drenched under the flickering light of a dying street lamp, stood a figure. Shoulders hunched, arms wrapped around herself, trembling against the cold. Her hair was soaked, strands clinging to her pale face. Even from a distance, he recognized her. The little girl from the photographs on his wall, now grown, but carrying the same fragile soul in her eyes. His heart lodged in his throat. He pulled the cab over, brakes screeching against wet pavement. For a moment he didn't move, afraid this fragile vision might disappear if he blinked. But then, with shaking hands, he pushed the door open and stepped out into the storm. Sarah, he whispered. Her head lifted slowly, eyes wide, searching, disbelieving. And then, recognition. Her lips trembled as she whispered back, Dad. The storm seemed to fade, the sounds of the city muffled as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Years of silence, of wounds left festering, collapsed into this one fragile reunion. David walked closer, his shoes splashing in the rain, his body shaking not from cold but from emotion. He wanted to say 1,000 things, apologies, regrets, confessions. But when he finally stood before her, all he could manage was opening his arms. For a second, she hesitated. Fear flickered in her eyes, the remnants of old pain. But then, like a dam breaking, she collapsed into him. Her sobs tore through the night as she buried her face against his chest, and his arms wrapped around her, pulling her in as tightly as he could. The world no longer saw a taxi driver. No longer saw a man invisible on rain-slicked streets. It saw a father reclaiming his place, a bond reforged in the storm. Tears blurred his vision as he whispered, You're safe now. You're home. For years he had been treated as though his existence held no weight, but in this moment he was everything his daughter needed. And in saving her, he felt something inside him mend, a wound he thought would never heal. But what she said next would shake him to his core. If you had the chance to forgive or be forgiven, would you take it? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because compassion can rewrite any story. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Show your support by liking this video, sharing it with someone who might need this reminder, and subscribing so you never miss the next story of kindness, redemption, and truth revealed.